CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center present The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 34, Getting My Life Back. And now, your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey. I'm Cynthia Alice, and I am the host with the most. I don't know why. I like doing that.
It's almost involuntary.
I know. I can't help it. And I am in 818 Studios with my inspiring producer.
This week I'm inspiring. I'm so glad to know that I inspire you.
You do.
Hi, my name is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey.
You forgot to say, what is...
Hey, what is up? What is up, everybody? This is Dave Croft. Was that better for you?
Yes.
Slip into announcer mode.
Don't mess with me, man. I just got used to what you were going to do.
You're a creature of habit.
Yes.
Yes.
Total.
Oh, when the other, I guess a couple of weeks ago, you said during the sermon, you're like, I have my routines. I got to have my routines. If the routine gets a little sideways, it makes you feel all squirrely. Yeah, I was right there with you. I even gave you a little one of these. I don't think you saw me, but I even gave you a little chest pound with your dog.
Well, it's to me, there's comfort in that. I don't know if it's because when I grew up, there was so much going on all the time. And that was that part of my growing up was actually kind of fun. But there's something about like the people too that I get to know. There's something about that routine, that they know me, I know them, and that just feels good. It feels like home.
Yeah.
That, I don't want to just be a number at when I go in to get coffee or, even at the bank. I mean, I'm one of the few people, I still go into the branch and they all know me by name.
Yeah. I go through the drive-through and they all know me. The people at Starbucks, I always order on the app ahead of time.
Yep.
But even still, it's like a cheers moment. I walk in, everybody's like, Dave.
Exactly.
And even though I spend maybe 15 or 20 seconds,
yep.
I always make it a point. I always make a point to try to make eye contact with somebody.
Yes.
I don't just blow and take my drink, thanks,
Oh, I know.
I always make eye contact and I say, thank you, and I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
I always make a point to do that.
Yeah, it's good. It's about being a responsible human in the world.
That's right.
And
it takes zero effort, zero energy to be kind to somebody. And you have no idea what kind of impact it could have on anybody's life. They might be having a terrible day. They might have just gotten chewed out by the customer before.
No kidding.
And a little bit of kindness can just be a salve to a bruised soul.
Well, it is, and I was just reading an article the other day about Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, and all the studies that have been done, on kindness and how not only is it so beneficial for the one who receives it, but even more so for the one who gives it.
Absolutely.
So not only is it fun to do, it's good for you.
Yeah, it's good for the soul. It's chicken soup for the soul.
Yeah. Well, after our last show, when we were talking about so much recovery and it was actually focused a little bit on how the problem started in the first place, that I wanted to get to some, for lack of a better word, solution. Today, the title of today's show is Show 34 is Getting My Life Back. And to me, that's an important topic because we all want to be conscious beings. We want to be authentic in our journey. We want to be able to be self-aware so that we are kind, so that we're not, taking people out with our anger, so we're not codependent to the point or wearing ourselves out. We want to really be responsible stewards of all that we've been given. And so when we discover what our areas of healing might be, it's really important to do the healing work, to get our lives back. Because if we've been sourcing in other people, if our self-worth is by how people view us, if we're in our addiction, we're not in our power.
Right.
So getting my life back, that title for me is about being in our personal power to the point that we are responsible stewards of what we've been given and to live the life we're here to live. I think ultimately every message I give is about healing what needs to be healed, reveal what needs to be revealed, heal what needs to be healed so that I can be a blessing to the world.
Right.
I mean, that's why we're here. And yes, we get to have fun in the process.
It should be fun.
Yes, life should not be full of trauma, drama, and leaving and coming back and relationships full of trauma and drama and tears and yelling. That's not how life is supposed to be.
No.
And if there's addiction, that's exactly how it is.
That's right.
And many of us know because we've either grown up in it, we've seen it in our children or our parents, and we know we don't want life that way. But we think, but how do I get to where I want to be?
Right. Yeah. If somebody's listening to the show and they're like, "Yes, I'm ready," but how?
Yeah.
Right, it's
right.
For me. I would imagine like being addicted to drugs has a very, very clear kind of, don't do drugs, drugs bad, stop drugs.
Right.
And there's the solution. I absolutely know it's not that simple.
Right.
I know. I'm not saying that. But to someone not in it, that seems like a very linear type of path to walk. But if you're talking about like codependence and love addiction,
I know.
That seems a lot. That's a knot ball that requires a lot of untangling, especially like if you live with them and
Oh yes, and it's also food addiction. I would put in that category as well because food addiction, love addiction, and even I would include sex addiction. That's in there. All those are necessary for life. And so how you deal with those. And you're right. It is on the physical level. It seems like okay, yes, drugs are bad, but the draw is so strong.
Right.
And depending on how deeply one gets into drug addiction, it's hard to pull out of it because you've killed so much of your brain cells, you cannot go backwards.
Right.
You can't get back what's been lost through the drugs. But I've known, I have a really good friend and she's given me permission many times to share, but she's been in recovery 30 years and she lost everything in her addiction, everything. But she did all the things I'm going to talk about today. So, and, she lost her kids. They were taken away. She lost her home. And, and then 20 years later, she owned a Buddhist retreat center. So her life was completely unrecognizable. She self-describes, her behaviors of she was a cocaine addict. And she said, I was the kind that was, sucking dirt off the floor in case there was some cocaine in there.
Wow.
To an amazing, amazing spiritual soul she is today. So what I've learned is that any of us in addiction are typically very sensitive, very thoughtful people, and because the whatever happened, whatever trauma was so painful, and it impacted us so greatly that we covered it up. But the divine energy, the divine essence, is still there. So
yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that. One of my sisters just a lot of issues and stuff growing up, including eating disorders and all these kind of things. And she was a wild child. And now what she does for a living is she counsels wild children.
Exactly.
She counsels at risk, and not just I've been there, but don't try to pull that bleep with me.
Yeah. Oh, it's like, I got you. I got your number.
I am just a future version of you. And so I know the deal. And they really respect her because of that. And,
yes.
And I'm not saying that somebody who hasn't lived through that can't be an effective counselor, but I do know that she is a more effective counselor because she's lived through that. And she's come on the other side and a master's degree and everything.
Well, Fred Cota-Lewis, who used to be my co-host, is a wonderful counselor for that very reason.
Yep.
I've seen him talk to people, and he knows exactly what to do and say. But yes, because he's been there,
right? And he said those things that people say to him. He's been the one on the other side of the desk.
Yes.
Making excuses or whatever.
Yes, and there's a great movie, and I re-saw it again. It's an old movie. It's like from the late '90s. It was called Postcards from the Edge, and
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep and Shirley MacLaine. So we have to put that in the show notes because it's the story about Carrie Fisher's life. It was based on her book, on Carrie Fisher's book. And it was especially kind of bittersweet watching it again recently after, after
Carrie Fisher's death.
Well, they're both passed away. Her and her mom, both passed away. And, her struggle with being both bipolar and also with addiction. But it was incredible because it took you a little bit through, what it's like to be in recovery, to be in rehab and you know, she was joking about, all I have to do is go to AA meetings every day for the rest of my life, and things like that. But it is an important part of the work. So, I think first, which I don't think, Dave, I gave you this to put, but first is, we have to make a decision to heal. We have to make a decision to heal.
And that's coming face to face, nose to nose to your own reality there, and your own fallibility and your own weakness, but also knowing the strength that you have within you to be on the other side of that.
Yeah, and I think largely when we are in addiction, we're still blaming everyone around us and not taking responsibility for what's ours to do. And so as long as we're still in the blame game, we're never going to heal. When I think of this idea of, making a decision to heal, the story that always comes to mind from the scriptures is the prodigal son story, because there was a moment of recognition when, the story of the prodigal son is that, he was given his inheritance, and we're told in the scriptures he went away and participated in riotous living.
Right.
And in other words, partied like hell.
Right. Oh, yeah. And blew his inheritance. And
blew his inheritance, and literally was, serving pig slop, and thought, even my dad's servants have it better than this. And so there's a line in the scripture that is so important. It says, he came to himself. And he came to himself and realized, what am I doing? It was like this moment of recognition of, I don't have to live like this anymore. And that was the decision to heal right there.
Yep.
But it was a moment of awakening for sure. It was like, okay, this behavior I'm doing, I am tired. I have hit, in other words, what we say in recovery, I've hit bottom.
Yep, rock bottom, yep.
If I go any further, I'm dead.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, that is, that's, in 12-step we say it's jails, institutions, and death. In that order.
That's the bottom.
That's the bottom. And so, when you're that low, you're going to make a decision one way or the other. And making a decision to heal is critical. None of the other things that I'm going to talk about today are even a potential if you're still blaming everybody for your situation.
What I like most about the prodigal son story is the fact that when he came back,
yes,
those who loved him, his father,
mm-hmm.
not only welcomed him back,
yes,
but wrapped his garments up around him, which would have been very undignified,
right,
for a wealthy, wealthy landowner. Grabbed up his garments and not just welcomed him, but ran towards him. And I think that's a beautiful picture of everybody who loves you.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
When you say, you know what, I'm addicted to this or that, I'm ready to turn my life around, they will all wrap up their garments and they will run towards you and support you in it.
Yes. Well, as a matter of fact, in recovery programs, they have what are called, family days, where where the person in recovery and rehab, where they, say what's going on, and the family is there as a witness to that, and there to show their love and support. And also what's important in the prodigal son is where the son says, I'm going to go to my father and I'm going to say, I have sinned against heaven and before you. And in the story, he's prepared to do that, but the dad doesn't let him. So it's like he has this moment of awareness of, oh my gosh, I did this to myself. My dad gave me a gift, but I did this to myself.
I got to admit, I've been the other son in that story.
The other son, right? Because the other son stayed home and said, "Hey, what about me?"
Because my another one of my sisters, wild and everything, and teen pregnancy and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And so when I was in high school, it should have been kind of the me show. All my older sisters were kind of up, and they should have been out of the house, and I should have basically had an only child experience for 2 years. And I was really looking forward to that. But no, now there's a brand new baby in the house.
Oh boy!
And so I really had to work through that.
I bet.
Not like jealousy to my niece.
No,
right. I loved
right.
her, but man, I carried some resentment about that for a while, and it really it really made me. I was like, I'm done with the house. I'm out. See you. Peace out. After Christmas vacation, my freshman year was the last and only time I spent at home once I went to college. Then it was Shannon's, Shannon's apartment. But I've been the other son in that.
Yes.
And being really frustrated because seeing my parents support my other sister, and feeling like, hey, man, I'm not getting mine. But I look back on it now, and that feels terrible because I feel like a terrible person. But I look back on it now, and I had need for nothing, right?
Of course.
I didn't go without. It wasn't what I expected, and
Yes.
it wasn't in the form that I, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes over here, deserved.
Well, and I think to a child, even a teenager, that's kind of traumatic.
Yeah.
Because you're expecting life to go one way and it goes another. And so it's like, well, wait a minute. And what's so amazing about all we talk about with the journey is we actually become stronger in those places where we feel we have been hurt. Or I talked to a friend of mine who's a medical doctor one time, and I said, "Tell me what you said again about the bone when it gets broken." And she gave me some big, medical thing I can't totally remember, but God bless her because she listens. But she says in the place that it was broken, it actually heals over and is stronger than it was before, like a bone, a break. And I've always felt that in the soul, that's the case also. So in this case of, this traumatic experience, in the case of addiction, as we're talking about, and in the case of your sister who's now a counselor, she's strong in that area because she's lived it.
That's right.
Because she's lived it. So, friends, there's hope no matter where you are in this. And I think it's funny we're riffing off the prodigal son, but it's a story I always come back to because it's like, even if your family doesn't love and run towards you, God does.
That's right. That's right. That's good.
Yeah, I mean,
that's really
because
good.
it's easy to feel alone when you've been in this, when you've been especially if you've been in active addiction, because many times we've lived to the point that the people that love us can't stand to be around us anymore.
That's right. You've torched those relationships.
You've torched them, yeah.
Beyond belief, because maybe there's been a pattern of, hey, I'm turning my life around, and there's only so many times that will fly.
Yeah, they're going to say, oh, yeah, right. I want to encourage you too. This is just something I'm thinking of. I can't tell you how important it is to have inspirational music to support when you're trying to heal. And especially if you've made a decision to heal, you need to just inundate yourself with support for the journey. I mean, you go to your meetings, and that was one of the first things today I wanted to mention. After you make your decision to heal, you've got to do some work on yourself. The first thing I wrote down for myself was my therapeutic work. I shared in one of the very first shows that when I was a teenager, after some trauma that I had been through, I really wanted to go get therapy, but my parents didn't understand that. And so I just lied and I took the MARTA train downtown. I live in Atlanta, and I took the MARTA train downtown, and I found a counseling center that would see me, and I got counseling on my own. I had to lie to my parents to get it, but I absolutely knew if I didn't, I felt like if I didn't, I would die. I thought I have got to talk to somebody or something really bad is going to happen. And I had supported siblings, but they had their own lives.
Right.
And my parents, wonderful hearted people, they just didn't understand. So guess what? I couldn't blame them. I couldn't blame my siblings. I was 15, almost 16. It was time to take responsibility to get my own life back. Yep. And because I felt out of control emotionally. So I think the therapeutic work is really important. I think, I also think, and when I say therapeutic work, I mean one-on-one therapy. You have to get somebody to talk to, and it could even be like an addictions counselor like Dave was speaking of, especially if you're going into rehab or something. It's so important to get someone who understands what you're going through, but also has some kind of spiritual context, to support your soul as you're walking through some of this.
I want to, the last few weeks we've been talking about especially during the Dream Big series, we talked about accountability and partners. Is this something that an accountability partner should hold space with you, or is it something more like, someone else, maybe somebody either, I don't want to say in authority, but mentorship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yes, and I was going to get to that, but I'll talk about it right now because yes, a sponsor is if you're in 12-step, one of the encouragements from the program itself is to get a sponsor. And in a sponsor, you want somebody who's been there for a long time, whose recovery program you respect.
Gotcha.
And then part of taking responsibility is you go and ask that person to help to see if they would be willing to sponsor you, because sometimes they can't. But that's also part of the healing journey, is admitting you need help.
Gotcha.
Which again is another. It's like a small step, MINI step, and MANY too, I guess. A mini step towards your healing. Because
I'm sorry. What does that look like for some of the other addictions we've been talking about the last couple of weeks? Like, let's say love addiction. What would, in your just opinion, what would rock bottom look like for that? We know like narcotics and alcohol, jail, death, all that. But
it could depending on the level of the love addiction, it could be that as well. If it turns to violence,
okay.
If it turns into stalking,
okay.
If people are love addicted and the love avoidant leaves, it turns into risky sexual behaviors.
Okay. What about codependence?
Codependence, it can turn into depression, anxiety. It can turn into...
would you say like suicidal thoughts?
Yes,
or something?
Suicidal thoughts and even suicide. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I mean, virtually every addiction ends in death because there's no future in it.
That's the end game.
There's no future in it. And it seems like in the short term, like I say, your soul's kind of found a way to manage, which is so amazing that our soul figures out a coping strategy. But at some point, it goes over into no going back. And so you have to decide, okay, this is the way I want to live, or this is not the way I want to live. So the decision to heal is paramount to getting your life back, I think.
And your rock bottom might look different than somebody else's rock bottom.
Right.
And there are different let's see, I guess different tolerances for variations of rock's bottom. you know what I mean? Like my rock bottom, like when I knew that I needed to get my weight under control, it was a certain like actual poundage, right?
Yeah, it was
once
like,
I hit that, and once I started getting too big for my fat pants, that was rock bottom. No, it wasn't like diabetes and I couldn't get out of bed. That wasn't rock bottom for me.
Right.
It was this, hey, I can't fit into the biggest pants I've ever bought, and I've got to get things under control.
Yeah, I've got to make a change. I've got to make a change. Well, we will be back and talk more about how we can heal even more on the recovery journey.
We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partner, CCU Orlando, who has helped make this episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey possible. Christ Church Unity is a welcoming community dedicated to transforming lives, celebrating diversity, and supporting soul growth. CCU Orlando is located at 771 Holden Avenue in Orlando, Florida, with Sunday services at 9 and 11 a.m. You can stream services live online as well as learn more at christchurchunity.net. We would also like to extend our thanks to our podcast partner, Aikens Counseling Center. Cassandra Aikens is a licensed mental health counselor dedicated to creating sacred space where clients can explore their own inner process in a safe, non-judgmental, and supportive environment. She works with individuals, couples, and groups who are seeking to live a more authentic life. Aikens Counseling Center is located in Winter Park, Florida, and can be found on the web at CassandraAikens.com. We now return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey.
Thank you for joining us again, and welcome back. I love talking about recovery because I think everybody is on some kind of recovery journey. We're all getting well from something, even if it's just from life itself. So what's amazing about the steps I'm talking about, the stages, I guess, that we all go through, the process of recovery, is that it doesn't matter if you're healing physically, emotionally, or from addiction. These are all ultimately the same steps. So they're the same path to take. So the last or the first half of the show, we were talking about how important it is to make a decision to heal and then to get support was right before the break. And again, it might look like therapy, it might look like a sponsor, and it may look like at first what we've been doing with the Dream Big series, an accountability partner. It's just somebody to keep you honest.
Yeah, or it could just be, go grab a coffee with somebody that you trust. It could be a coworker. I've had. Back in Memphis, I did a lot of that kind of thing. We call it discipleship, but I did that with students and covered wide range of stuff. A lot of porn addiction.
There is
with college kids and that kind of thing. But also a little bit of substance stuff. And but even now here in Florida, just because I enjoy doing it and I love sharing, having come out of my own like porn addiction stuff. All
porn
so
addiction is sex addiction is huge.
Yeah, and it's so
anonymous
and easy to get right. It's criminally easy to get your hands on. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh, and so, but even like some folks that I've either coworkers or whatever, people that I've like done gigs with and stuff, I'm just like, because my feelers are kind of out, and I'm like, hey, and I'll just say, hey, you want to go grab a drink or want to go grab a coffee or something? Let's just talk life, you know, and I may do it a couple of times, but if you are sponsory, I guess
sponsee.
Yeah. If you have that in you, you kind of already know what I'm talking about. But if right now you're maybe looking for someone to fill that role, just know that it might not necessarily need to be a quote unquote official kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be permanent and it's not forever. But if there's somebody that you trust, coworker, somebody at church or whatever, just ask them to grab a drink, share a little bit of life. You'll be crazy surprised how helpful it can be.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to not go through it alone and to have somebody else know about your process. Sometimes it just helps you to say things out loud. And when you're keeping things in your mind, you can do, crazy stuff and make up crazy stories.
Absolutely. I was doing a Skype call with a colleague of mine, and then I just noticed, hey, he doesn't really, something's weird. I say, hey, man, everything okay? And then for like the next hour, spilling everything about his marriage and kids, and like I might be going through a divorce, and then like the next time I checked in on him, he's like, yeah, it's good. Everything's good. And I think it's just what you're talking about. He had bottled that up for so long, and almost been afraid to even like say it out loud. That once he said it out loud, it really helped him out.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is true for you. I want to check this out, but the story I make up is that for men, men are typically more isolated than women in their process because men are quote supposed to have it together, right? You're not supposed to need another man to talk to,
right? And I don't even think it's something as overt as that is weakness. I just think it's just kind of baked into you. Just kind of keep it to yourself.
That's what I mean. Yeah, for men,
and I know that I definitely had that modeled. My dad was a very stoic person. He never withheld love, but he wasn't an overtly emotional person.
Right. Well, he was military too, right?
Right, exactly. A career Marine
and
everything. But he was never Major Dad. He took off the fatigues when he came home.
Right.
But there was always love towards my mom. Right?
Yeah.
And we never felt unloved, but it was very, very contained, almost Vulcan-like, Spock-like like kind of existence.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I think, the whole point we're wanting to say is we don't want you going through it alone.
Right, absolutely.
And if you're working a 12-step recovery, yes, you really want to need to get a sponsor. But if it's just going through life and you're in a tough patch, hey, reach out and talk to a friend. And there's all kind of hotlines now. If there's somebody you don't even have to talk to, have someone to talk to, reach out anyway. Try to find some support for yourself because we don't want you going through it alone. And sometimes just saying it out loud really, really helps.
It takes the power away from it.
It does. It does. And again, sometimes the things we're saying and doing really are not based in reality. They're based on an old way of doing things. They're based on old beliefs about ourselves. And I just had somebody say to me the other day, it's like, I'm a lot better than I used to be about honoring my own self-worth. It's like, she said to me, I used to let people get away with treating me like that, but no more. That she said, I finally learned to give myself a little more value. And she's done an incredible amount of spiritual work. She is very involved in her spiritual community, and she works on herself every single day, and it's made a difference.
Yep. Speaking of community, that's kind of, once you have a sponsor, or once you have the one or two people that can help out, there's a deeper support network available.
Oh, for sure. And I think spiritual community is super important. And I've always said it takes a village. As a parent, I'm so glad my son has a spiritual community and an incredible school with incredible teachers and a private, violin instructor. And I feel like it's that way with life. I mean, I have a therapist. I have an incredible partner that supports me. I have friends, but I also have my spiritual community. And even though I'm the leader of the spiritual community, if I said to any one person, and I know this for a fact, any person I said at CCU, hey, I need some support right now, they would turn around and support me instantly, which I never would, but I might to a board member. I might to a board member or a staff member, but to a congregant, no, because my job is to support them. But if there was anything that I needed, they would absolutely do it. And well, I will say my experience is not every community is like that, but CCU is special.
Well, I would imagine some senior ministers wouldn't feel free, and maybe not even anything overtly spoken, but I have to have it all together. I'm not allowed.
Yeah.
Not just infallible, the unspoken infallibility of our leadership, but the idea of even feeling weak and almost embarrassed, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and so many people have said to me that they've never heard a senior minister say, oh, I messed that up, before. And I'm real willing to say that, because I think the lie that we tell as ministers is that we do have it all together. What we do is we learn spiritual principle through our life experience, and then we teach it, which means sometimes we don't know, and there's a new learning that happens, So I think it's important to share that. But in terms of the projection of the job, most people assume if we're the ones up front, we have, quote, it all together, whatever that means.
Right.
And that we don't have any problems, and that we don't have any addictions, and that we don't have any family issues, or whatever. And so many will not ever, admit to, what's the word? Maybe their idiosyncrasies or the issue. But I find that to be authentic as possible is what makes me approachable, is what makes our church real.
Absolutely.
And that people know, because I've had struggles and I've come out the other side, that, they can too. That's right. So to me, it's empowering ultimately. But in terms of how people view the job, it's they often view that, I must have it all together.
Right.
Or
and
something.
So if you're listening to this, and maybe you are in leadership at your church, maybe you're head of the children's program, or maybe you're ahead of the music program, or maybe you just you've been sitting in the same pew every single week for 20 years.
Yeah.
And people think you have it all together.
People think we got to love our codependents.
You think people, but that can be a real barrier for asking for help.
Yes, it can. It really, really can. And, part of the 12 steps is surrender. Part of the 12 steps is learning to surrender. And surrender means not I give up, but that, I surrender my illness of thinking everybody's thinking, my projections onto life itself, that's the only reality, that we surrender that and we just become authentic. And it can be in every area. Often I think people buy things that they can't afford because of what people might think if they don't. That we even go on vacations we can't afford because it looks fabulous, in the pictures, and we want to be that person in those pictures. And being real and authentic with where you are is so freeing. I would much rather stay at home and live within my means than go on a fab vacation that I really can't afford.
And put it on a credit card at 25% interest and
Yeah.
pay on that for 20 years.
Yeah. For some reason, this is coming to me. I've worked with a lot of people over the years because I've done so much prosperity work. I've worked with a lot of people with money issues, for lack of a better word. And I shared a time when I was going to pay the doctor, and it was a self-pay situation, and it was more than I thought. And I got up to the desk, and that'll be $457 or something. And I said, okay. I said, well, I think I have a couple options here. And she said, well, would you like to put that on your credit card? I said, no, I wouldn't. I said, but I don't have that much money today. And I don't know how you can work with me, but I can pay half. And then I can pay you the rest in another, like, let's say it was 2 weeks or something. It was a while back. It was many years ago, but I'll never forget it. And she said, that's absolutely no problem. And I felt like it was grace from the universe, and it was freeing for me because I didn't have to pretend to be something I wasn't or have something I didn't have. And it was like, oh, you mean this is okay? And so it felt...
And that lady didn't judge you for that.
No.
She
I
didn't
mean,
think
it was
you
like...
white trash can't pay your bill or anything like
No,
that.
I mean, it was like she was so like, oh, no problem. It was like, hey, well, we want to get paid.
Right.
And you don't have a credit card. So either, the service has been provided. So
you can't unring that bell.
yeah. And so there's something about really working it in the world. And so I think to work it, in my mind, means you're just authentic with where you are. You're authentic with where you are. And so, really getting your life back is ultimately about taking responsibility for where you are. So, once you make your decision to heal, well, then you got to be about it. You got to start doing serious therapeutic work where you are, looking at your soul. You're looking at some of the things that have really, caused you to be where you are. And then unraveling those things. What are those behaviors that you're doing? What are those things that you're saying? What are those thoughts that you're thinking? And then once you see those, well, you kind of start trying it out with life. And you check it out. Back to my story I think that was last show, right? About the guy with the hat.
Right, yeah, the backwards hat guy.
The backwards hat guy. We became really, really good friends.
Were you able to joke about it later?
Oh, totally, totally. And he said I was right where you were. He really honored me because I was so putting my value and even my codependence. Well, I like to call that time that period of life is called raging codependence.
That's the chapter in your
That's
autobiography.
the chapter, yeah, called Raging Codependence. And we were able to laugh about it because I did work it and I did see, and it was after that I did a really intensive experience. And the name of it, well, they do it at the Meadows. I mentioned also last show that program, and it's called Survivor 1 and Survivor 2. And when I did it, it was called Legacy, and it's where you go back, you look at, and it's intensive. You go back and you look at your life, you look at those traumatic experiences, and believe it or not, you write every one of them down. It could be abuse, it could be, severe trauma. It was the severe traumas, and you wrote them all down. And it was a small group. I did it like with a group of all women, and it was incredible. There was like a film producer, there was an interior designer. I mean, just incredible women. And at the time, I was the youngest by far in the group because I was in my 20s, and most of them were like 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s even. And I mean, there was even somebody there that was like, "Oh my gosh, you're my mother." He was like, spirit was really working on me for sure. I felt like I was in a pressure cooker. And after we wrote all that down, then we set it in front of the whole group, and then we gave back the pain, the shame, the guilt, whatever it was. And there was a physical thing we were doing. We were literally like hitting something and like just screaming. I give back, the pain. I give back the shame. I mean, it was so intensive. And then after all of us finished our work, and we did it individually, and it took several days, And as we turned around, we were, each of us in our own way, very, like physically transformed.
Wow.
Like in my case, well, like one woman, for instance, had looked very angry, and I became friends with all the women. She was not angry, but she had this specific look on her face where her lips were like drawn in, like somebody who's angry. And after her work of, giving back the pain, the shame, the guilt, whatever, she turned around and all the wrinkles were gone.
Oh, wow.
It was like her face like transformed.
So she looked younger, I bet.
She looked 10 years younger when she
Wow.
turned around. And so when I did mine, and we became, like I say, real good friends. I ended up spending some time at her home in Vail, Colorado is where she lived. I ended up spending time in her home that next summer and got to know her whole family and everything. Just a really good friend. And when I did my work, I turned around and she said, "Oh my God, you grew up."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she said, "I lost 10 years, you gained 10 years. It was like I went from being this scared kid who was trying to,
Make everybody
make
happy.
it okay,
and
make it
pleased.
okay,
Yep.
make it okay, make it okay. Is everybody okay? Is everybody okay? Okay, now can I relax? Oh, you're not okay. That was the role I took on. Nobody made me do it. It was all me that took it on. And so when I turned around after my work, they said, "Oh my God, you look like an adult." And I said, "I feel like it." And that was a huge beginning to my process. And it was yet another decision to heal. Every moment that we catch a new glimpse and awareness, then we make the decision again, and then the work continues. And I remember several shows ago, we were talking about this in the spiral.
Yep.
And you did the
shepherd tone.
shepherd tone.
Right.
And that stuck with me, the shepherd tone feeling and the sound. It's like in my consciousness, and that's always what the journey is, that spiral upward. And the therapeutic work continues today. I still find myself in, a vibrant spiritual community. I still, I don't have a sponsor right now, but what I have is a very supportive, mentor who, serves that capacity for me. And every single morning, I'm still working it. I'm still working it. So I want to encourage you that wherever you find yourself on the journey, that every day there's a potential to get your life back even more. And what we're ultimately doing is returning to our spiritual nature. We're returning to our essence, which is full of love, full of compassion, full of purpose, full of energy. And so as we make a decision to heal, we do our work, we get support, we even find ourselves in spiritual community, and we commit to doing the process. So, and our goal with this very show is to support you in doing just that. So we're always so happy when you join us on the journey, dear friends, and we're excited always that you honor us, by listening. And then when you're impacted, that you share our show. I can't tell you what it means to be able to say to people, we are all over the world. We need to update on how many countries we're in, because I knew the last I looked, I think we were in 7 countries, and I knew at least 12 had visited our website. Of course, the only one we couldn't figure out was how many times they downloaded was Russia.
Yeah.
So that's awful cool. So that's a lot of fun. So, friends, our encouraging word is, don't be afraid to do the work to get your life back.
Yep. You're not alone.
Yeah.
There is support for you.
Yep. So blessings on the journey, and always know we are holding you in prayer for God's highest and best in your life. Many blessings.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey, presented by CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible through the continued support of our angel patrons, Dove Borland, Angela Martinez, Peter Gibson, Paul Caswell, along with our partner patrons, CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center. If you would like to help be a part of bringing shows like this and other programs to the channel, please consider becoming a patron. For information, episode show notes, and details about our other shows on the channel, head over to experienceofthesoul.com. And if you enjoyed this program, you can help spread the word by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, or the podcast platform of your choice. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2018, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Shannon Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.